How did a small village turn into a modern city? What does the Tatar mosque, which is more than 100 years old, look like? What can you learn by visiting the Museum of the Kokshetau city history? We will give answers to all these questions in the new episode of Welcome to Kazakhstan project.
Kokshetau и является административным центром Акмолинской области.
Although Kokshetau is the administrative center of the Akmala region, not so much is known to the common man about this small town, not to say about tourists visiting the Republic of Kazakhstan. But is it really that simple? And are the real tourist attractions hidden in the streets of this town? Let's try to find out. This is Welcome to Kazakhstan project. My name is Zakirjan Mamlutov. Let's broaden our horizons. The first thing we did was climbing the hill from which you can see the whole city. The guide Veronika Antipova told us about its history. What in general is the history of these places? Where did the word Kokshetau come from? Why was the city named that way?
Well, the question is very common. Many guests coming here ask, how does Kokshetau translate? We proudly say Sinigorye, Blue Mountain, and then they ask where are these mountains.
So, where is this mountain? Show it to us.
In fact, this name goes far into the history. A long time ago, a squad of Cossacks came at the foot of the Kokshetau mountains, which are located in this direction. When there is no foggy haze, you can even see the panorama of the mountains. It was there where they intended to build first a military fortification, then the village of Kokshetavskaya. But there were many downsides to this. The lack of fertile and pasture lands, which was observed there in the highlands, and there were many forests. And later at the foot of the Bokpa hill,
where we are now standing?
Yes, where we are. This is where the development of our city has begun. That's why the private houses sector has been preserved at the foot of the hill, and multi-story districts have been built further on the other side of the lake. When the city was founded and was being built, the hill was completely covered with forest. It was a pine forest. It also became building material for the construction of houses, and the lake was nearby. It was convenient for irrigating fields, watering gardens, fishing in this lake. Therefore, the place turned out to be very convenient. The fortification subsequently turned into the village of Kokshetavskaya, and then into the city of Kokshetau, and then into the city of Kokshetau. At the moment, the population of the city is 167,000 people.
In 1903, a manufacturing shop of the merchant Korotkov was built in the center of the city. After that, Singer sewing machines were sold here. During the World War II, there was a stable, then a cinema. In the 90s, the building was abandoned, and only in 2014, the Museum of Literature and Art was opened here. More than 7,000 exhibits are stored in the museum's funds. The collection of ancient utensils is diverse. There is a wooden astau designed for serving meat and a two-headed ojao for pouring kumis, made from the hip bone of a camel. The personal belongings of Aktate, beloved one of Akan Sere, were brought from the village of Madeniyet. These are a mirror, a foot machine of German production Singer, a dombura. We learned about other curiosities of the museum from Gulzayra Sabitova.
2008 жылы Алматы қаласындағы Шығыстану университетінің
In 2008, scientists from the University of Oriental Studies in Almaty had visited the Akmola region with an expedition. The purpose of this expedition was to study how competently our ancestors wrote in Arabic in the 18th, 19th centuries in the Akmola region, and how they copied the books of the Quran in Arabic, and how many manuscripts were preserved in the museums of the region. Arabic scholar from the University of Oriental Studies, Asherbek Muminov, had visited our museum and looked through more than 100 books in Arabic. Among them, he found a manuscript of Diwani Hikmet by Hoja Ahmed Yesawi in the Kipchak dialect of the Chagatai language, written on Bukhara paper around the 16th, 17th centuries. This manuscript was translated in 2008 by the scientists from the University of Lev Gumilov and published by a new publishing house called Kokshetau version. In our museum, in addition to the manuscript of Diwani Hikmet, there is an ancient 5-liter bowl made of wood. It's about 500 years old. This bowl was donated to our museum by the 8th generation of the Waliyev family who live in the village of Kinisare, near Kokshetau.
Another interesting exhibit is Adal Bakan. It belonged to Akan Sere and was multifunctional. At first, it was a standard clothes hanger, but probably the most important function is a support for the shanarak in a yurt. It was made by a local blacksmith and encrusted with silver. Not all pre-revolutionary buildings survived the Soviet period, so many religious objects suffered at the hands of the Bolsheviks. Most of them have remained in history, in the records of dusty archives, but not the Jibek Mosque. It was built at the expense of wealthy Tatar merchants. In the 1930s, the mosque was deprived of its minaret and turned into an ordinary municipal building, but the building itself avoided the destruction. In 1989, it was returned to the believers of Kokshetau and the restoration process began. Like most mosques built by the Tatars, the architecture of Jibek is characterized by eclecticism, a combination of national motifs with romantic, sometimes even fairy tale elements, a real monument of wooden architecture. The Mullah Mahambet Ustaz told us more about the mosque.
Бұл мешіт 1903 жылы соғылып, 1904 жылы аяқталған. Бұл мешіттің құрылысы.
Today, the Jibek Mosque is growing and developing. A new mosque was built. The construction of the old historical mosque began in 1903 and was completed in 1904. The first chief imam of the mosque was Jibek. The mosque was named in his honor. Until 2015, it was called Nauan Hazret. Currently, a new madrasa is being built next to the mosque. Here, children read and learn the Quran, listen to lectures on the topic of Islam. The madrasa existed before, but the building was demolished and a new majestic mosque was built in its place. However, the madrasa was not closed and is still functioning. It is located in the Hasan district. About 10 qaris have graduated from this madrasa to date. Qari is one who has fully memorized the Quran.
10 қари шыққан. Шамамен қазіргі таңда осы мешіттің қасына медресе соғылып, сол медреседен иншалла Алла жазса, Алла тағаланың кәләмін жаттаған қарилар шығады деген ойдамыз.
Many architectural treasures, artifacts of past eras, have been lost forever. But fortunately, there is an interesting location in Kokshetau in which unique exhibits have survived to this day. We are talking about the Museum of the Kokshetau City History. You can visit it by getting to the old part of the city. Today, the museum complex is a historical monument of the state significance. The The building is well preserved, and this is not surprising because it was looked after. It was in this house that Valerian Kuybyshev, a prominent Soviet political figure, spent his childhood and youth. Probably in the USSR there is not a single city where there would not be a street named after him. Actually, starting from 1949, this complex of buildings housed the Kuybyshev Memorial Museum. For more than 30 years, the sister of the politician Yelena Kuybyshev was in charge of the museum. In 2000, at the turn of the millennium, the object was reorganized into the Museum of the Kokshetau city history. In 2004, the city celebrated its 180th anniversary, and on this significant date, the exposition was opened to everyone. On our further journey through the museum, we were accompanied by Botagoz Gabdulina.
В данной экспозиции отражена история, жизнь, быт казахского народа.
This exposition reflects the history and life of the Kazakh people of the early 20th century. It's clear that the Kazakh people have always led a nomadic lifestyle, and it was difficult for them to get used to the administrative structure that was proposed in connection with the decree on the Siberian Kyrgyz. That is, it was necessary to adjust to the settled lifestyle.
Необходимо было переходить к оседлому образу жизни.
The further transition of the Kazakh people from a nomadic lifestyle to a settled one was going on during the period of the Soviet authority. Collectivization, hunger, difficult years of the war, all this was reflected in the minimalistic way of life. In the living rooms of those years, one could find only the most necessary things. The history of Kokshetau is recreated in the halls of the museum in sufficient detail. So a separate hall takes us into the atmosphere of a prosperous apartment. High-quality furniture catches the eye, which not every Soviet family could afford. For example, an oak sideboard, a massive bookcase. The gramophone was a valuable piece of equipment. But in the next hall, you can see how ordinary citizens with an average income lived.
Представлена очень интересная экспозиция. Экспозиция «Быт горожан 60-х годов». Это время, в котором жили...
You have a very interesting exposition in front of you. Exposition Life of Citizens of the 60s. This is the time in which our parents and our grandparents lived. This way of life is very close to the older generation. Here you see such exhibits as radiogram, a bookcase. You see that the bed has always been very decorated with all kinds of embroidery. There were round tables. Sideboards were filled with all kinds of dishes. There were surely sewing machines in every apartment. Women sewed their own dresses and fineries.
Возможной посудой. И обязательно в каждой квартире были швейные машинки. Женщины сами себе шили платья, украшения.
And this is a unique exhibit. Retro car Cadillac of the 30s, brought from Moscow. If you want to see even earlier technology, then pay your attention to the bicycle of the German brand Durkop, a summer carriage, as well as winter sled Kasheva. The residents of Kokshetau used to ride such vehicles. We often underestimate provincial towns, but their history can keep secrets that will surprise even the most demanding tourist. And the trip to Kokshetau is an excellent proof of this. Discover something new with us. Welcome to Kazakhstan.